My time's expired.
Gentleman yields. I now recognize Mr. Carter.
Thank you, Mr.
For 5
Chairman.
minutes.
And thank you to our witnesses for joining us today as we convene to discuss the attempted assassination of former President Donald Trump and its profound implications on our nation's political landscape. It is imperative that we recognize the growing threats to our homeland. The failure of the Secret Service to protect former President Donald Trump must be thoroughly investigated and addressed to ensure such an incident never happens again. Violence has no place in political discourse, regardless of our philosophical differences, our parties, or our beliefs. We must stand united against such actions and uphold the principles of democracy and respect. What happened on that day was an incredible breach, a threat to our nation because one of our leaders were placed in harm's way. Secret Service has a principal role, and that is to provide protection for our party leaders, whether they're Republican, Democrat, or other, whether they are someone that we agree with or someone we disagree with. It's not a luxury. It's a necessity. It's an imperative. And while we all have lots of questions, it appears abundantly clear that the two of you, and while we appreciate you being here, own no responsibility to the breach. And I respect the fact that the questions that are coming to you are very difficult for you to answer because you have limited facts. But I do appreciate your presence. I appreciate your leadership. I appreciate what you do. And for all the men and women in uniform, we thank you for putting your lives on the line to protect us. I will ask this general question. If you were in charge, can you say what you might have done differently?
I would defer to the Secret Service from the standpoint that our expertise in the Pennsylvania State Police is not primarily focused on full-time dignitary protection, sir. I would endeavor generally to try and put whatever resources and partnerships in place to maintain and ensure the safest event we possibly could.
Do you believe that the coordination failed between agencies?
Again, I can only comment on the state police portion at this point. We continue to learn more 10 days in, and I have not seen the Secret Service operations plans.
Mr. Yost, can you join us and share any light in your expertise on
Yes,
where we are and how can we make sure this absolutely never happens again, regardless of who might be at the podium? A president is a president is a president.
I could not agree with you more. In this situation, if I'm speaking on behalf of local law enforcement or state law enforcement, I would say that, again, the primary responsibility of making these calls, making these decisions, and making the operations plans going to be the Secret Service. As I mentioned earlier, there are some 19,000 agencies across this country. It would be impossible to have any continuity or any consistency with what we do in protecting, our leaders. So Secret Service would have to play a huge role in this part. If you're asking me personally what I would have done different, well, obviously I look at an assessment of the situation and look at all of the elevated positions that were in place. They should have been part of a contained area. But that's just my own personal view of not seeing news reports and not physically being on site.
I have never served in any form of law enforcement, but I think I would have figured that that perimeter should have been tighter. I think I could have figured out that there's no way that that building where the shooter sat, laid, and aimed should not have had snipers on top of it as well, negating any opportunity for a shooter to be there. Notwithstanding that there should have been a sweep of the area, we should have had our people on that building as a point of view for our former president. And as I said, a president, a president, a president, a former president, a former president, former president, a cabinet secretary, a leader. We deserve to have answers to these questions, because when we don't have answers, those who would rather divide and create theater by saying things that aren't true and they know aren't true, distorting facts and trying to suggest that somehow people played an active role. Listen, the American people deserve the truth. And so I am imploring that we have somebody at these tables that can answer the questions, the good, the tough, the uncomfortable, the comfortable, because the American people deserve to know. This is something that should have never happened. And we as a committee, in a most bipartisan fashion, should stand together to make sure that we send a message always, that we will always protect our leaders, whether we agree with them or not. Mr. Chairman, I yield.
The gentleman yields. I now recognize the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Jimenez, for 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Mr.